G'day everyone. Thanks for dropping in and having a look about this Contact Center Managers course. My name is Justin Tippett, but to be honest, I'm not that important because the guy that I'm talking to right now is Daniel Ord, and Daniel is the trainer for this particular course. Welcome, Daniel.
Hi, Justin. Thanks for having me.
Always a pleasure to talk to you. Now, if people are on this page, that means they're interested in this Contact Center Managers workshop. Now, we've both been in the contact center industry for decades, Dan, and I think you've been training in contact centers for 20 years. So you've gone from running them to actually training it for 20 years. And this particular workshop is one of our highest rated workshops that we've been doing. Can you give us just a little bit of background, or give the people that are watching a bit of a background on this contact center management workshop?
Absolutely, Justin. And you're right. You have your dates correct. It's 10 or 11 years of running centers in Asia and the US, and then the last 20 years teaching contact center management. And Justin, I'm going to say there are two trends we can talk about today that I'm seeing and that I've seen over the 20 years, to be honest. And the first trend is one that sometimes people sit up and take a deep breath, but here we go. We're an industry of amateurs. We really are an industry of amateurs. And I think when I say that, what I'm basically saying is, none of us, including me, goes to school for this kind of stuff. Mm-hmm. And we end up in this job by accident. So almost everybody I've met anywhere in the world is going to say, Dan, check, I didn't go to school for this. Check, I came into this job completely by accident. It wasn't my career choice. So I think we have to look in a mirror and first admit that. Then the second part of this is we tend to learn on the job. But keep in mind that when you join a center and you're learning on the job, you're learning very much how the center works where you work. So if you work for company X, you're learning how company X views a contact center, thinks about a contact center, looks at the contact center within the overall structure of the organization. But something I can tell you straight away is that I work with so many different contact centers, and yet there are differing standards and differing approaches. So the KPIs you're practicing are completely different than the KPIs from the neighbor across the street, even if you're in the same Melbourne suburb, let's say. Now, obviously, depending on your industry, there's going to be a level of tailoring. That's clear. But at the same time, you and I both know from industry experience and practice, there are just some essential basics. And so what happens, I find, is people end up absorbing the way their contact center works. And then when they perhaps move to another industry or another center, they really struggle because all the beliefs they had learned in contact center A don't actually apply to contact center B. So I think that's a really important consideration. We're amateurs. We don't go to school for this. We get into the industry by accident and we learn on the job.
Yeah, look, you're 100% right. I mean, we've both been lucky enough to work over the world in contact centers and see literally hundreds, if not thousands of different contact centers. And it's you don't know what you don't know, right? It's not until you actually start going, hey, you know what? Wow, greater service or service levels, that's actually the same. They might have different actual measures, but the way we do it is the same in America as it is in Singapore, as it is in Australia. And so you start to see, wow, there's actually some industry stuff here that I should know. Now, you mentioned there was two trends, Daniel. So you've given us the first trend that we're in a polite way, a bunch of amateurs, and I agree. What's the second trend?
Well, the second trend, and one that often drives, 20 years later, we're teaching contact center management. It's as popular as ever. So people are like, wow, why? Well, we talked about the first trend. The second trend is just the turnover in the industry. Mm-hmm. Now, when people hear turnover in contact center, they instantly go to agents. But let's talk about middle managers and senior people here, because when you are really good at this, when you are a high-powered contact center manager, or team leader, or team manager, you and I both know you are super in demand. Yeah. And these kinds of people don't necessarily stay put. The recruiters are calling up and saying, hey, you want to take over a bigger job? Hey, you want to take a regional job? So, for example, someone I would have taught contact center management in 2005 has probably long left either their employer there or that job running the contact center, which probably means there have been 2 or 3 contact center managers over that period of time. So I think it's important to recognize that it's not a good thing, but a lot of times when our senior contact center management staff leaves, they leave with a lot of know-how in their head and they take that somewhere else. And you would think the practices would stay in place, that they have been embedded in the culture and the governance and all that stuff of the contact center. But that's not often true. What happens is a new center manager comes in from another company, bringing what they learned from where they used to work, and boom, all of a sudden the KPIs change, the practices change. Now, again, is that healthy into some regard? Yeah, of course. I'm not saying you replicate exactly what the earlier person did, but I just find it so strange that it's so dramatically different and still doesn't map to industry practice sometimes. So I think that's the other trend we have to consider, is this constant turnover, especially at what I call the high-powered folks. They're always in demand.
You're right. Absolutely. And I mean, even the frontline stuff, we know that call centers become the default recruitment agency for organizations, don't they? Because if you've got a good staff member who's great at following processes and structure, who understands the customer, who, you know, blah, 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 they're snapped up really quickly, right? They're stolen into HR or training or frontline in retail or you name it. The front door is the call center and off they go into the organization. But when you get into team leaders and managers, absolutely, there is also the brain drain, right? That happens at that level as well. Now, you mentioned you've been training this course for 20 years, and I've been lucky enough to sit through this course, obviously a few times now that we run it through CX Skills. But when we very first met, story for everyone who's watching this, was years ago when you were doing this in Melbourne, physically in Melbourne, pre-COVID, when we could all travel around the world, right? And I've got to say, having at that point, I'd been in the industry, say, 25 years, I reckon by then. I'd run some pretty senior call center. I was CEO of an outsourcing company, or, you know, judged awards around the world. And I have to say, this was the best contact center managers course I've ever sat through, because everything that Daniel teaches you is consistent globally. It is the fundamentals. It's like if we had call center university, this is what you'd be taught. So on that note, Dan, can you just tell people that are listening now a little bit about the workshop itself?
Sure, and I'll start with this. You always have to be careful in an industry like contact center that years of years of experience don't equal mastery.
Yeah.
That's really important. So when I hear someone start a conversation that say, I've been running contact center for, and then fill in the blank on how many years, that's a meaningless number. Yep. I'm sorry, but that doesn't tell you anything, because you could be running a center 10 years and doing the wrong things for 10 years, basically. So be very careful if that's the entry ticket to your job interview, as I've been doing this 10 years, because I don't think that's enough. Yep. And Justin, I'm going to actually name some global clients that brought us in and literally have flown us all around the world to teach our contact center managers. So companies like DHL, companies like Standard Chartered Bank, companies like Agoda. And when they approach us, here's what they'll say is, they'll say, we have great people, we have smart people. Some of them have done this for years. But what we need to do is get them on board with the know-how. They've got the experience, but we need someone to really champion the know-how so they can marry the know-how with the experience and do a better job. So I honestly sometimes see my role as bringing clarity. Yep. A lot of clarity. I think the number one feedback we get on this is, I think you just mentioned it, I wish I had taken this course 20 years ago. Yeah. I wish I had taken this course 10 years ago.
Oh my God, it is absolutely the number one comment we get from everyone, because it's you don't know what you don't know. If you've worked in the same organization and you learn off the manager who previous to you, who learn off the manager previous to them, that's all you're going to know. And, you know, we talk about Erlang C, we're not getting to details here, but most people go, what the hell is Erlang C? Now, it's a basic fundamental that, you know, we now know, but it's not, I'm not surprised anymore when people go, I have no idea what that even means. And I've been a contact center manager for 15 years, 20 years, right? We hear it all the time.
Yeah, and I mean, you and I are both LinkedIn people. We love LinkedIn, we use it. But, you know, when I read some of these debates happening on LinkedIn, I'm like, but that problem has already been solved. There's an answer to that. So why are we wasting our time arguing about this? I mean, here's one example. We have 4 modules in this course, and the first module's on wait time. Yep. And we cover service level, creative service, and all the related wait time metrics, but people still don't have a good understanding of the relationship between these wait time metrics. So in a LinkedIn post, maybe 1-2 years ago, I made a comment about, why are people still using average speed of answer? It's a useless metric. If you have service level, it's not really valuable. I get a lot of pushback from people, and people running big centers saying, oh, I couldn't run it without ASA, and ASA is so important. And I'm like, really? And then I'll say, well, what about this, 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 and this? Now, I've learned never to train on LinkedIn. It doesn't work. But I'll say, what about this, this, and this? And then they'll write back and say, those are good points, but I'm still going for ASA. Okay, fine, but again, so many of these things have been sorted out, and you can go so much further in your career if you're like, okay, I'm willing to open my mind and say, I need to really understand how all these pieces of the puzzle fit together. And I'm willing to have my beliefs challenged, even if they're very deeply held, for example. So I think just this first module on service level, by the way, even service level versus response time, that's a basic requirement any manager should know. How do I calculate the number of staff I need to handle emails is a completely different mathematical calculation than how many staff do I need for live chat. But when you say to people, do you know when to use service level or when to use response time for those calculations? A lot of people say, Dan, what is response time? So again, we don't go to school for this. So it's not about judging, but it's like, well, let me explain it. Once we explain it, it's like, oh, now I get it. So now I know how I can do these calculations. I think that first module, just covering the wait time stuff, is already fantastic. So.
Absolutely. All right. Well, you've whet the appetite. So what's in the second module?
The second one is on efficiency KPIs. And Justin, you and I both know that if I had to ask only one question to know if a center has their act together or not, and remember, this is a theoretical exercise, but if I were allowed to only ask one question, I would say, what are the KPIs you use to measure agent performance? What are those? In other words, if you're going to give an agent at the score at the end of the month and say she's an A+ agent, he's a B- agent, how are you going to tabulate that? That answer is all over the place in so many places. So some people are going to tell you we do it on number of calls handled, and other people are going to tell you we do it on average handling time. Now, other people are going to tell you they do it on occupancy, and other people are going to have all sorts of other answers. And the moment you look at that and you hear these answers, you're kind of aware. What we cover in Module 2 is what are the right efficiency KPIs to look at? Who's responsible for those KPIs? In some cases, it may be agents. In some cases, it may be management. In other cases, the KPI is completely wrong. Absolutely 100% fundamentally wrong. And that's sometimes the biggest belief change people have to go through is, ooh, I have to let go of this KPI because now I can see it's actually damaging my quote unquote customer service or customer experience desires. So I'm glad now that I know how to run a more efficient contact center. So that's the second module.
Yeah, so things that all fit like their occupancy, adherence to schedule, average handle time, all these industry terms you hear are all covered in Module 2. And there is cause and effect, and you'll learn about that as well in this course, because if you focus on one and not the other, you'll be in trouble pretty quickly. So Daniel actually walks you through how all those relationships work and why that's so important. The third module, Daniel, is about sort of forecasting. So just a high level of what all that means.
It is high level, and we have forecasters actually go through this. And the good news is forecasters say, Dan, we like the way you explain it, because obviously forecasting is a very specialized activity, and there are programs out there just for forecasting. But forecasting is such an important process that takes place in a center. Everyone that works in a center, from an agent up to the director, should understand what it is, how it works, what it means, and honestly, what is their role in this entire process? Because every single person in a center should be rowing that boat in the same direction. And I find people were like, oh, now I see. And obviously the forecasting process links very much back to the KPIs that you set.
Yep.
So all of this is interrelated, as you've alluded to. This is an ecosystem we're talking about. And when we look at an ecosystem, we look at the impacts on our customers, obviously, we look at the impacts on our agents, but we also look at the impact on our organization. So.
Yep, love it. And the final module, Daniel, which I love, is essentially what we call Contact Center University.
Yeah, I've been teaching this stuff for many years, but it must have been 5 or 6 years ago before I met you at that course in Melbourne at the Marriott, as I recall. That was 2017 or 8. My goodness. I said, it's probably easier to take some of these disparate but really important topics and just put them into a contact center university model. So we talk about things like shrinkage or rostered staff factor. That's an important one. We talk about the pooling principle. That has a lot to do with how occupancy comes out in your center. We talk about the law of diminishing returns. And frankly, I think the thing that's most exciting and most fun is how we always close the course. We calculate a labor budget. because you can't calculate a labor budget for a contact center if you don't have mastery of operations. So by the time a person's gone through the earlier 3 modules, by the time we come to this, funny enough, about an 11-slide exercise, they're like, now I get it. That's how I calculate I need 11,500 hours of agent time to clear 7,200 hours of call load. Now I get it. Yep. But you can't start with that because you lose everybody.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, if you are considering this course, I hope this has just given you a little bit of an insight into what you can expect. I think there's lots of courses out there, but I honestly think one of the things that separates this course from other courses you're going to do is the person that you just heard from, because, you know, not only has Daniel got 30 years experience in contact centers and he's worked with the best and is one of the best in the world at it. He's an accountant by background. I know he doesn't tell many people that, but, you know, he understands the numbers, and I think the reality is in contact center world, you know, we have to speak the lingo of business to actually get ourselves heard in the broader organization. So you get some insight into that as well. And he's got incredible real world experience that he brings into this course. And, you know, I put my brand and my name to it as well. That's how passionate I am about this course. I only recommend courses that I would do myself, or I would put my people through. And this is the course that we, as I said, it's one of our most popular courses that we do. And I just love hearing people after they've finished the course, because their mind's sort of blown. Because even if you, as you said right at the start, Daniel, just because you've done 10 years or, you know, I've been a call center manager for 10 years doesn't mean you've got mastery of contact centers, but this will help you, I promise.
Yeah. I think you have a video from one of our students from Melbourne at one of our sessions when we were doing it face-to-face. And I mean, she very honestly said, when I came into this, I have a lot of experience. I didn't really expect that I would learn a lot of new things. And then exactly what you just said, mind blown. And I think whether I'm in Singapore, whether I'm in Australia, whether I'm in Germany, UK, you name it, it's the same response and the same reaction, because I think people need clarity, Justin. That's my word for 2021 is clarity.
Yep.
Please give me clarity.
Couldn't agree more. So Daniel is right. There is a video of testimonials. We filmed that the last time we did, whenever it was in person. Unfortunately, it's a bit hard to do video testimonials when we do it live, but there are heaps of testimonials that people have written after the course that you'll find on the site as well. So if you sort of still need some convincing, have a read of some of those, and that should get you across the line. Of course, if you've got any more questions, just give me a call. The phone number's on the website. You know, we work with Daniel really closely, and so you can be assured that it's always a course that's evolving. Things change in call centers. While the fundamentals are the same, there's always little tweaks. And even though we've been doing it for 20 years, we keep improving the course. Every time something new comes along, it goes into the course. So don't think you're getting a course that's 20 years old that hasn't been touched. We update this course all the time. So thank you for watching. Hope you've learned a lot. Daniel, thank you for taking the time to share it all with us.
I appreciated it.
We hope we'll see you guys on the course soon. Bye for now.
Bye.